Thugs try to bully a veteran security guard, but what happens next will shock you. Mike Harrison stood at his post outside Memorial Plaza, his weathered face masking years of combat experience. The afternoon sun glinted off his polished security badge as tourists wandered through the memorial grounds, unaware that they were about to witness something extraordinary that would expose a dangerous plot threatening the heart of the city. Mike adjusted his dark blue security uniform, his shoulders square and posture perfect, old habits from his Marine Corps days that never quite faded. The Memorial Plaza stretched before him, its marble monuments and eternal flame drawing crowds of visitors who came to honor fallen heroes. To most, Mike was just another security guard, keeping watch over the nation's treasures. But beneath his composed exterior lay 20 years of special operations experience and instincts that never truly went silent. The autumn breeze carried the sound of chattering tourists and clicking cameras across the plaza. Children pointed at the towering monuments, while parents read the inscriptions in hushed, respectful tones. Mike's eyes constantly scanned the crowd, a habit ingrained from countless missions. He noticed everything. The young couple taking selfies by the reflecting pool, the elderly veteran with his family near the Wall of Heroes, the school group gathering near the center fountain. But something else caught his attention. A group of young men lingering near the eastern entrance. They stood out from the usual tourists, their body language setting off warning signals in Mike's mind. 5 of them, all wearing expensive streetwear, huddled together while occasionally glancing his way. Their leader, a tall man with silver chains and designer sunglasses, kept checking his phone while smirking in Mike's direction. Mike had seen that look before, the predatory gaze of someone looking for trouble. In his civilian security role, he'd dealt with his share of troublemakers who thought it was funny to harass the rent-a-cop. Usually, a stern word was enough to send them on their way. But these guys were different. There was an edge to them that spoke of real malice. Visitors continued their tours around him, oblivious to the tension building in the air. A young mother guided her children past Mike, nodding respectfully as they passed. He returned the gesture while keeping the group in his peripheral vision. They were moving now, spreading out in a way that raised more red flags in Mike's mind. Their formation was too coordinated, too practiced for random troublemakers. His radio crackled softly at his hip. Routine check-in from Central Security. Post 4, status report. Mike reached for his radio, but his eyes never left the BIA group. Post 4, all clear, he responded, even as his combat-honed instincts told him otherwise. Something wasn't right about these guys, and it wasn't just their aggressive posturing. The plaza's marble columns cast long shadows in the late afternoon sun, and Mike noticed how the group seemed to use them for cover as they moved closer. Their leader pulled out his phone again, but this time, Mike caught him scanning the security camera positions. Not the behavior of someone just looking to harass a guard. More tourists gathered nearby, some already pulling out phones, sensing the building confrontation. Mike remained still, his face impassive, but his mind was racing. 20 years in, special operations had taught him to trust his gut, and right now every instinct was screaming that these guys weren't just random thugs. They were a diversion. But for what? As the group's leader started walking directly toward him, Mike caught movement near the service entrance. A figure in maintenance coveralls moving too quickly, too purposefully toward the restricted area beneath the plaza. The timing wasn't a coincidence. These thugs weren't here to cause trouble. They were here to create a distraction. Mike's hand rested casually near his radio as the group approached, their leader's smirk growing wider with each step. The plaza's visitors began to notice the tension, some stopping to watch, others hurrying past with concerned glances. But Mike's focus was split between the approaching threat and the mysterious maintenance worker who had just disappeared through a door that should have been locked. The leader of the group stopped a few feet from Mike, his designer sunglasses reflecting the setting sun. "Well, well," he said loudly, clearly playing to the growing audience. "Look what we got here. Playing soldier, old man?" Mike didn't respond. his mind already gaming out scenarios. The group had positioned themselves to block direct lines of sight to the service entrance. This was coordinated, professional, and definitely not about harassing a security guard. As phones came out to record what looked like an impending confrontation, Mike knew he was about to shatter their expectations of how this would play out. The leader of the group, who Mike would later learn was Marcus Stone, took another step closer, his expensive sneakers scraping against the memorial's polished stone. "What's wrong, Rent-A-Cop? Too scared to talk?" His voice carried across the plaza, drawing more attention from tourists who were now forming a loose circle around them. Marcus's crew spread out in what appeared to be random positions, but Mike's trained eye recognized it as a practiced formation. The shortest member of the group, wearing a red designer hoodie, had his phone out, live streaming the whole thing. "Yo, what's up, everyone? We're about to show this wannabe cop what real power looks like." 200 viewers already, another thug called out, his heavily tattooed arms crossed over his chest. "They want to see some action, Marcus." Mike remained still, his face impassive, but his mind was racing. The maintenance worker had disappeared into a restricted area that required special clearance that wasn't usually granted during public hours. These thugs were trying to keep all eyes focused here, which meant whatever was happening below was the real threat. Marcus reached into his jacket, and Mike tensed slightly, but the thug only pulled out a water bottle. With a theatrical flourish, he unscrewed the cap and took a long drink before holding it out toward Mike. "Thirsty, old-timer? Must be tough standing here all day pretending to be important." The live stream chat was filling with comments now, most of them encouraging the confrontation. The guy in the red hoodie moved closer, making sure to get every angle. "Looks like he's frozen, boys. Maybe we should check if he's still breathing." 500 viewers! Someone called out. "Show them what we do to fake heroes!" Mike's radio crackled again, a coded security check that was usually routine. But this time, he noticed something off about the transmission. The voice was slightly different, the cadence wrong. Someone had compromised communications. Marcus took another step closer, now well inside Mike's personal space. The smell of expensive cologne couldn't quite mask the tension rolling off him. This close, Mike could see the earpiece partially hidden beneath Marcus's carefully styled hair. These weren't ordinary troublemakers. They were professionals playing a role. "You know what I think?" Marcus announced loudly, playing to his growing audience. "I think all these memorials, all these monuments to heroes, it's all just for show, just like this guy here, pretending to guard them." He waved his hand dismissively at the wall of heroes behind them. "Bet you never served a day in your life, did you, old man?" The crowd had grown larger now, phones recording from every angle. Some people looked uncomfortable, others excited at the prospect of drama. A few were trying to signal other security guards, but Mike noticed how Marcus's crew had positioned themselves to block the most direct routes to the plaza's other posts. "Still nothing to say?" Marcus taunted, then suddenly flicked his water bottle, sending a spray of liquid across Mike's uniform. The crowd gasped, and the live stream chat exploded with reactions. "Oops," Marcus smirked. "Looks like you got a little wet there. Better stay still though, right? That's your job, standing around looking tough while real men do whatever they want." Mike felt the water soaking into his shirt, but his focus was elsewhere. In his earpiece, he could hear fragments of radio traffic that confirmed his suspicions. Regular security channels were being flooded with false reports, drawing attention to minor incidents around the plaza's perimeter. Whatever was happening beneath the memorial was being covered by multiple layers of distraction. "Maybe he needs more water to wake him up," one of Marcus's crew suggested, pulling out his own bottle. "I mean, what's he gonna do? He's just a Rent-A-Cop. Can't touch us without losing his precious job." Marcus grinned wider, encouraged by his audience's reaction. "You hear that, old-timer? We own this place now. Matter of fact." He reached for Mike's security badge. "Let's see if this thing is even real." Mike's hand shot up faster than anyone could follow, catching Marcus's wrist in a grip that made the thug's eyes widen in surprise. "Don't," Mike said quietly, his first word since the confrontation began. The single syllable carried enough authority to make Marcus instinctively try to step back, but Mike's grip held firm. The plaza fell silent, except for the sound of water, dripping from Mike's uniform onto the memorial's stone floor. In his earpiece, he heard another coded transmission, this one about movement in the memorial's underground archives. Time was running out.
Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story.
"You're making a mistake," Mike said, his voice carrying easily across the now silent plaza. "Last chance to walk away." The livestream chat was going crazy, but Marcus couldn't back down now, not with his reputation and cover on the line. He tried to pull his hand back, but Mike's grip was like iron. For the first time, real fear flickered across Marcus's face as he realized he might have seriously underestimated his target. Mike released Marcus's wrist, but the tension in the plaza had shifted. The crowd sensed it. This wasn't going to be the simple confrontation they'd expected. Marcus rubbed his wrist, trying to maintain his tough facade, but his eyes darted to his crew members, silently signaling for backup. "Big mistake, old man," Marcus snarled, but Mike wasn't focused on the threat. His attention was on the subtle details others might miss. The way Marcus's hand kept touching his ear, adjusting an earpiece that tourist troublemakers wouldn't be wearing. The coordinated movements of his crew, who had positioned themselves to block specific sight lines to the memorial service entrances. Most telling was the digital watch on Marcus's wrist, displaying what looked like a countdown rather than the time. Through his own earpiece, Mike caught fragments of radio chatter that painted a disturbing picture. Security channels were being flooded with reports of minor incidents around the plaza's perimeter, a suspicious package by the east entrance, a fight breaking out near the parking lot, a medical emergency by the reflecting pool. Too many incidents, too perfectly timed. "You really should have stayed still," Marcus announced loudly, playing to his live stream audience. But Mike caught the subtle glance Marcus threw toward the service entrance, where a second figure in maintenance coveralls had just slipped through the door, carrying what looked like industrial cleaning supplies. Except Mike knew the memorial's maintenance schedule by heart. No cleaning crews were scheduled during public hours. The guy in the red hoodie was still streaming, narrating for his viewers. "Yo, this rent-a-cop thinks he's tough. Show him what happens to people who don't know their place, Marcus." But Mike's military-trained mind was already piecing together the puzzle. The memorial's underground archives housed more than just historical documents. In the secure vault below, accessible only through the service tunnels, was a collection of classified military artifacts and intelligence files deemed too historically significant to destroy. The kind of information that certain organizations would pay millions to acquire. Marcus stepped closer again, his designer jacket opening enough for Mike to spot something else. A tactical radio, military grade, not the kind of equipment street thugs would carry. "Last chance, old-timer," Marcus growled. "Step aside and pretend you didn't see anything. Trust me, you don't want to be a hero today." Through his earpiece, Mike heard another coded transmission. "Package secure, timeline active, maintain, containment for 7 minutes." The voice was professional, clipped, definitely not regular security personnel. More tourists had gathered, phones recording what they thought was just another viral confrontation video in the making. But Mike noticed how Marcus's crew kept redirecting people, subtly positioning the crowd to create a human barrier between the plaza's main security office and the service entrance. "What's wrong, tough guy?" Marcus taunted, moving to block Mike's view of the service door. "Starting to realize you're in over your head?" Mike's hand brushed against his own radio, feeling the familiar pattern of scratch marks he'd made on its case. During his special operations days, his unit had used similar marks to identify compromised equipment. Now those old habits were paying off. The The slight differences in his radio's surface confirmed it had been swapped with a duplicate, probably during the night shift. The guy in the red hoodie circled closer, his live stream continuing to draw viewers. 1,000 people watching now. They all want to see what happens to wannabe heroes who don't know when to back down. But Mike's focus was on the service entrance, where he caught a glimpse of movement through the narrow window. More figures in maintenance uniforms, moving with the practiced efficiency of military training. They were using the memorial's own maintenance protocols as cover for something much bigger. Marcus must have noticed Mike's attention shift because he stepped directly into his line of sight. "Eyes on me, old man. You don't want to miss what happens next." He cracked his knuckles theatrically, playing to the cameras, but Mike caught the subtle hand signal he gave his crew. Standard military. Code for accelerate timeline. The pieces were falling into place. The confrontation, the compromised radio, the coordinated distractions. This wasn't just a group of thugs looking for social media fame. This was a professional operation using the live stream as cover for something far more dangerous happening beneath the memorial's surface. Mike's years of combat experience screamed at him to act now, but he held his position. In special operations, he'd learned that sometimes the best way to stop a threat was to let it develop until you could see its full scope. Whatever was happening in the archives below, these weren't just random criminals. They were trained operatives, and they'd chosen this memorial for a reason. The sun had shifted, casting longer shadows across the plaza, and Mike noticed how the crowd's positioning had changed. What looked like random gathering of spectators was actually a carefully orchestrated pattern, designed to control movement through the plaza while appearing completely natural. These people knew what they were doing, which meant the real question wasn't what they were after, but who they were working for. Marcus reached into his jacket again, and this time his hand emerged holding something that made Mike's combat instincts surge, a metallic object that glinted in the late afternoon sun. Not a weapon, but Mike's own security access card, identical to the one still clipped to his uniform. "Looking for this?" Marcus smirked, waving the duplicate card. Amazing what you can copy when someone's not paying attention. The implications were clear. They'd been planning this for weeks, studying the memorial's security protocols, creating perfect replicas of essential credentials. The crowd murmured as they noticed the card, but most assumed it was just another part of the confrontation they were filming. The guy in the red hoodie zoomed in with his phone. "Yo, looks like our boy found something interesting. Keep watching, folks. This is about to get good." Mike's hand tightened imperceptibly on his radio. The duplicate card explained how they'd accessed the service entrance, but it also meant their infiltration went deeper than he'd suspected. Security credentials were coded with unique identifiers. Copying them required inside help. Suddenly, a new voice cut through the tension. "Son, I believe you have something that doesn't belong to you." The crowd parted as an elderly man stepped forward, leaning on a polished wooden cane. His weathered face and ramrod-straight posture spoke of military service, but there was something else about him that caught Mike's attention. The way his eyes scanned the scene, taking in every detail with professional assessment. Marcus turned, annoyed by the interruption. "Back off, Grandpa. This doesn't concern you." The old man's grip shifted slightly on his cane, and Mike noticed the subtle positioning, the stance of someone ready for combat despite his apparent age. "That's where you're wrong," the man said calmly. "You see, some of us don't like watching punks disrespect veterans." "Veteran?" Marcus laughed, playing to his audience. "This rent-a-cop? He's just a force recon, special operations." The old man cut him off, nodding toward Mike. "I can spot one of our own, just like I can spot fake tough guys playing soldier." His eyes locked onto Marcus's earpiece. Nice equipment. Bit sophisticated for a street thug, wouldn't you say? Mike saw Marcus's crew tense at the old man's words. They weren't expecting someone to identify their tactical gear. The live stream chat exploded with questions, viewers wondering how what looked like a simple confrontation had suddenly turned into something else. "Listen, old-timer," Marcus started. But the man cut him off again. "Name's Commander James Walsh. Retired," he said, his voice carrying the unmistakable authority of someone used to command. "Now, why don't you tell us what's really going on in the archives below?" The question hit like a thunderbolt. Marcus's face flickered with shock before he could catch himself. In his earpiece, Mike heard urgent whispers. Their operation was unraveling. That's when Marcus made his move. He lunged forward, not toward Mike but toward Commander Walsh, clearly seeing the older man as the immediate threat. But Walsh was ready. His cane swept up with surprising speed, catching Marcus's arm and redirecting his momentum. The move was pure Marine Corps close combat training, executed with veteran precision. Mike didn't hesitate. As Marcus stumbled, Mike's hand shot out, snatching the duplicate access card from his grip. In the same motion, he stepped forward, placing himself between Walsh and Marcus's crew, who were now moving to surround them. 10,000 viewers! The guy in the red hoodie shouted, still streaming. "This is crazy!" "Shut it down!" Marcus barked, all pretense of the street thug act gone. His voice had changed, taking on the clipped tones of military command. "Containment breached. Execute Omega Protocol." Through his earpiece, Mike heard urgent responses from below. "Negative on shutdown. Package is nearly secured. Maintain position for 3 more minutes." The plaza had erupted into chaos. Tourists scattered as Marcus's crew dropped their casual poses and moved with coordinated precision. The live stream continued, but now it was capturing something far different from the confrontation its viewers had expected. "You just made a serious mistake," Marcus growled. His designer sunglasses gone, replaced by the cold stare of a trained operative. "Both of you." Commander Walsh tapped his cane twice on the stone floor, a deliberate signal that Mike recognized from his special operations days. They had seconds before this turned violent. "No," Mike finally spoke, his voice carrying across the plaza. "Your mistake was thinking a Force Recon Marine would stand idle while you infiltrated a memorial he's sworn to protect." His eyes locked onto Marcus. "And your bigger mistake, assuming I was alone." As if on cue, several tourists in the crowd suddenly shifted positions, their casual poses transforming into ready stances. Walsh's backup, Mike realized, veterans who'd recognized the threat and moved into position while everyone was focused on the confrontation. The stage was set. What had started as an apparent attempt to bully a security guard had just revealed itself as something far more dangerous. And now, with the lives of real tourists at risk and unknown threats moving through the archives below, Mike knew there was no going back to his quiet post by the memorial wall. The next move would change everything. The plaza erupted into action. Marcus's crew dropped all pretense of being street thugs, moving with military precision as they tried to establish a perimeter. But Walsh's hidden backup was faster, emerging from the crowd to counter their positions. Real tourists scattered, finally realizing this was no ordinary confrontation. "Clear the plaza," Mike commanded, his voice carrying the authority of his Marine Corps days. "Everyone out now!" The crowd began rushing toward the exits, phones still recording as they fled. Only the guy in the red hoodie remained, his live stream continuing to broadcast. "You don't understand what you're interrupting," Marcus snarled, his designer clothes suddenly looking like the costume they were. He pressed his finger to his earpiece. "Team 2, status." The response crackled through Mike's own compromised. "Radio. Package secured. But we've got company. Archive security is responding to the vault breach." Mike's mind raced. The memorial's underground vault didn't just house historical artifacts. It contained classified military intelligence, dating back decades. Files too sensitive to destroy, too historically significant to black out completely. And now he knew what they were really after. Commander Walsh stepped forward, his cane now held like the weapon it clearly was. "They're after Operation Ghostwalker," he said grimly. "The Kuwait files." Marcus's face tightened, confirmation that Walsh had hit the mark. Operation Ghostwalker was classified at the highest levels, its files sealed in the Memorial's vault for 30 years. Whatever was in those documents was worth killing for. The live stream was clever, Walsh continued, addressing Marcus. Perfect. Cover for your operation. All eyes up here while your real team works below. But you made one mistake, choosing this memorial on this day. What's special about today? The guy in the red hoodie asked, still filming. Mike understood suddenly. Annual Veterans Council meeting, he said. Half the people in that crowd were former special forces. Marcus's team was rapidly repositioning, trying to secure escape routes. Through the radio chatter, Mike could hear the chaos unfolding below. Archive security had discovered the breach, but they were dealing with professionals. The sounds of fighting echoed through the service tunnels. Last chance, Marcus announced, his hand moving toward his jacket. Walk away. This is bigger than you realize. Oh, we realize, Walsh replied. The question is, do you know who you're really working for? Because those Kuwait files, they don't just contain military intelligence. They contain proof of treason, names of officials who sold out their country, and someone's very desperate to make sure those names never come to light. Marcus pulled a gun, small, professional grade, hidden expertly until now. But he wasn't fast enough. 3 of Walsh's backup team had already drawn down on him, their weapons appearing as if from nowhere. The red hoodie guy finally dropped his phone, raising his hands. Through his earpiece, Mike heard urgent communications from below. Primary vault breached. Target files acquired. Beginning exfil through Route Charlie. Route Charlie? Mike muttered, then his eyes widened. The maintenance tunnels. They're not just going for the files. They're planning to detonate charges in the archive. Bury the evidence that anyone was ever there. Walsh nodded grimly. Standard cleaner protocol. Your boy Marcus here isn't just running a heist. He's part of a cover-up operation, aren't you, son? Marcus's only response was a cold smile. That's when Mike noticed the second digital display on Marcus's watch. Not a countdown, but a detonator sync. The confrontation up here wasn't just a distraction. It was intended to keep first responders focused on the plaza while the charges below did their work. 5 minutes, Marcus said calmly. That's how long until the charges blow. And my team has the only deactivation codes. So now you have a choice, stop us or save everyone in those archives. The plaza had emptied of tourists, but security teams were converging from all directions. Mike could hear police sirens in the distance, but none of them knew about the explosive charges planted in the memorial's foundations. Commander Walsh's voice cut through the chaos. Mike, the archives. I'll handle this topside. Go. Mike didn't hesitate. He knew the memorial's layout better than anyone, including the maintenance tunnels that ran beneath the plaza. As he moved toward the service entrance, he heard Marcus laugh. You're too late, Marcus called after him. The files are already gone, and in 5 minutes, no one will ever know who ordered their theft. But Mike had noticed something none of them had. The way Commander Walsh had positioned his cane when he mentioned Operation Ghostwalker. It wasn't just a fighting stance. It was a signal. Because today wasn't just the Veterans Council meeting. Today was the anniversary of Operation Ghostwalker itself. And if Mike's instincts were right, Walsh wasn't just some retired commander who happened to be visiting the memorial. He was guarding something far more important than stone walls and bronze plaques. And now, with the lives of archive staff hanging in the balance and classified files about to disappear forever, Mike had to figure out how to stop an elite tactical team, disarm explosives, and expose a decades-old conspiracy. All in less than 5 minutes. Mike sprinted toward the service entrance, his mind already mapping out the maze of tunnels below. Behind him, he heard Walsh coordinating with his hidden team, their military precision evident in their swift response to his hand signals. 3 minutes! 40 seconds! Marcus called out, still playing to his dwindling audience despite being surrounded. Better hurry, soldier boy! But Mike had already reached the service door. his real security card granting him access. As he pulled it open, he heard quick footsteps behind him. Commander Walsh had somehow crossed the plaza in seconds, moving with none of the frailty he'd displayed earlier. "You'll need this," Walsh said, pressing something into Mike's hand. It was a small key card, matte black with no markings. Security override. Level Omega. Mike's eyes widened. Level Omega clearance was reserved for the highest echelons of military command. "Sir, who are you really?" Walsh's weathered face hardened. Operation Ghostwalker wasn't just a mission, son. It was a revelation. We uncovered something in Kuwait that certain powerful people wanted buried. Those files aren't just about treason. They're about a shadow war that never made the history books. The service door closed behind them as they descended into the tunnels. Emergency lights cast everything in a red glow, and the sounds of conflict echoed from below. Walsh moved with the fluid grace of someone half his age, his cane now clearly revealed as a tactical weapon. 3 minutes, Walsh said, checking a device that looked like a watch but was clearly military-grade tech. The extraction team will be heading for the north maintenance shaft. It's the only exit not covered by regular security cameras. "Why tell me all this?" Mike asked as they moved swiftly through the concrete corridors. "Why trust me?" Walsh's response was cut off by the sound of gunfire ahead. They pressed against the wall, years of shared training making them move in perfect sync. "Because," Walsh whispered, "I've been watching you, Staff Sergeant Harrison. Your record in Force Recon, your choice to work security here. You're not just guarding a memorial. You're guarding the truth." Mike processed this as they approached a junction. The sounds of fighting were closer now, mixed with the urgent shouts of archive staff being evacuated. "The Kuwait files," Mike said. "What's really in them?" "Names," Walsh replied, checking the corridor. "Dates. Proof that Operation Ghostwalker uncovered a network of high-ranking officials selling military secrets. But more importantly, proof of what they're planning now." An explosion rocked the tunnel, not the main charges, but something smaller, diversionary tactics. Walsh barely flinched. "These aren't just mercenaries," he continued. "They're cleaners, sent to bury evidence of something much bigger. Marcus and his team topside? They're just the visible part of the operation." 2 minutes, 30 seconds, Mike's radio crackled, with Marcus's voice. "Sure hope everyone's out of those archives." Walsh's face tightened. "The charges are their backup plan. Even if they don't get the files, they'll bury any trace that someone tried to steal them. Classic Black Ops protocol." They reached another junction, and Mike held up his hand. His years of guarding the memorial had taught him every inch of these tunnels. "Archive vault is through there," he whispered, "but they'll be expecting that approach." Walsh nodded, understanding instantly. "Maintenance shaft? Behind the electrical room. Connects directly to the vault's emergency exit. They'll have someone guarding it, but they won't expect anyone to know about it," Walsh finished. "Not bad, Marine." They changed direction, moving silently through the service corridors. Mike's mind was racing, piecing together everything he'd learned. "The Veterans Council meeting today. That wasn't a coincidence, was it?" Walsh's grim smile confirmed it. "We knew they'd make a move soon. The files were scheduled for digital archiving next week. Once they're scanned and uploaded, they'd be impossible to completely erase," Mike concluded. "So it had to be today, but you were ready for them." "Almost ready," Walsh corrected. "Didn't expect them to compromise the radio frequencies, or to use social media as cover. Clever bastards." They reached the electrical room. Through the door, they could hear movement. Professional, practiced footsteps. At least 2 guards watching the maintenance shaft. 1 minute, 45 seconds, Marcus's voice taunted through the radio. Walsh checked his unusual watch again. "Charges are on a synchronized trigger. We disarm one, we disarm them all. But we have to reach the trigger first," Mike finished. He studied the door, remembering his years of combat training. "Sir, I have an idea, but you're not going to like it." Walsh raised an eyebrow. "Son, I've been in this game longer than you've been alive. Try me." Mike explained quickly, his voice barely above a whisper. With each detail, Walsh's expression shifted from skepticism to grudging admiration. "Crazy," the commander muttered. "Absolutely crazy." Then he grinned. "Good thing I've got a reputation for crazy plans myself." Their brief moment of planning was interrupted by another explosion, closer this time. The extraction team was getting desperate, which made them dangerous. But now Mike and Walsh had something they didn't: a perfect understanding of each other's capabilities and a plan crazy enough to work. The real question was whether they could pull it off before Marcus's countdown reached 0. Mike moved first, using his security override to kill the power to the electrical room. The sudden darkness was followed by startled movements inside, exactly what they'd expected. Walsh's cane shot out, catching the door handle and pulling it open with surprising force. The guards inside reacted professionally, their weapons trained on the doorway. But Mike and Walsh were already moving. Mike went low, rolling beneath the predicted line of fire, while Walsh used his cane with devastating efficiency, the seemingly harmless walking stick transforming into a blur of precise strikes. "Contact in the electrical room," one guard managed to shout into his radio before Mike's shoulder charge sent him crashing into a circuit panel. The second guard tried to bring his weapon to bear, but Walsh's cane caught him behind the knees, dropping him instantly. 1 minute, 30 seconds, Marcus's voice sang through their earpieces. "Tick-tock!" Mike secured the guards efficiently, using their own zip ties against them. "These aren't regular mercenaries," he noted, recognizing their gear. "Special forces training. Russian, maybe Israeli. Private military contractors," Walsh confirmed, already moving toward the maintenance shaft. "Expensive. Very expensive. Someone really wants those Kuwait files to disappear." The shaft was narrow, barely wide enough for one person. Metal rungs led both up to the plaza level and down toward the archives. The sounds of conflict echoed up from below, mixed with the urgent shouts of archive staff being evacuated. "They'll have the vault locked down," Mike said, checking his borrowed override card. "Probably rewired the security protocols." Walsh smiled grimly. "That's why we're not using the door." He reached into his jacket and pulled out what looked like a small tape measure. Shaped charges. Not enough to damage the files, but enough to... Another explosion rocked the tunnels. This one much closer. Dust rained down from the ceiling as emergency lights flickered. 1 minute 15, Marcus announced. "Hope you're not still in those archives." Mike and Walsh exchanged glances. No more time for careful planning. They descended the shaft quickly, their movements synchronized from years of similar operations, though decades apart. At the bottom, they could hear voices, professional clipped tones discussing exit strategies. "Target file secured," someone reported, beginning final countdown for cleanup protocol. Walsh signaled to Mike, using Old Force recon hand, signals that brought back memories of countless missions. 3 targets, professional stance, watching the main entrance. They weren't expecting an attack from the maintenance shaft. Mike pulled himself onto a pipe running along the ceiling, years of training making the awkward movement silent. Walsh positioned himself by the shaft exit, his cane ready. They had one chance to get this right. 1 minute, Marcus's voice echoed through the corridors. "Getting awfully close, folks." Walsh caught Mike's eye and nodded. Mike dropped from the pipe directly onto the nearest guard, his weight and momentum taking them both down. Before the others could react, Walsh had already engaged the second man, his cane striking with surgical precision. The third guard managed to get a shot off, the sound deafening in the confined space. But Mike had already rolled, sweeping the man's legs while Walsh's cane cracked against his wrist, sending the weapon skittering across the floor. "Vault breach!" someone shouted from inside the secure room. "They're coming through the..." The rest was cut off as Mike and Walsh breached the vault entrance. Inside, 4 more operators were frantically gathering files, stuffing them into armored cases. The team leader, a scarred man with close-cropped gray hair, held what looked like a detonator. 45 seconds, Marcus announced cheerfully. Stay back, the team leader ordered, his accent Eastern European. 1 press, and this whole place collapses. Mike assessed the situation instantly. The vault's contents were scattered across tables, classified files, data drives, and what looked like old photographs. The Kuwait files were obvious. A thick folder marked with dates and code names that meant nothing to most people, but clearly meant everything to those trying to steal them. It's over, Walsh said calmly, his cane pointed at the leader. You really want to die down here for someone else's secrets? The leader's response was to press a button on his radio. Marcus, begin final countdown. Authorization Echo 7. Copy that, Marcus replied. 30 seconds, ladies and gentlemen. Hope everyone's got good life insurance. Mike saw his opening. As the leader was focused on Walsh, Mike launched himself forward, using a fallen chair as a springboard. His hand caught the detonator just as the leader tried to press it, both men crashing into a table of files. Walsh moved with incredible speed for his age, engaging the remaining operators before they could draw weapons. His cane seemed to be everywhere at once, striking pressure points and vulnerable joints with devastating accuracy. 20 seconds, Marcus called out. Mike grappled with the leader, both men fighting for control of the detonator. A punch caught Mike in the ribs, but he absorbed it, remembering his force recon training. The leader was good, very good, but Mike had something he didn't, a reason to fight beyond money. 10 seconds. The leader's elbow caught Mike's jaw, sending him stumbling back. But as he fell, Mike's hand caught a loose file, the Kuwait documents. In that split second, he saw something that made his blood run cold. A photograph, partially visible, showing familiar faces in unfamiliar company. 5 seconds! Walsh's cane cracked against the leader's wrist, finally dislodging the detonator. Mike caught it as it fell, his thumb finding the disarm sequence they'd observed earlier. 3, 2, 1. Mike pressed the button. Silence. Then Marcus's voice, suddenly less confident. We may have a problem up here. The vault was secure. The charges were disarmed. But as Mike looked at the photograph in his hand, he realized this wasn't over, because now he knew why these files were so valuable and why certain people would kill to keep them hidden. The real war was just beginning. In the aftermath of the vault battle, Mike stared at the photograph in his hand. The image was dated 20 years ago, taken in Kuwait. But it was the faces that made his pulse quicken. High-ranking military officials shaking hands with men who would later be identified as enemy operatives. Standing in the background, barely visible but unmistakable, was a familiar face. Senator Howard Drake, now chair of the Defense Committee. Those weren't supposed to survive, Walsh said quietly, securing the last of the unconscious operators. Drake ordered all photos from Operation Ghostwalker destroyed, all evidence erased. Mike's mind raced. That's why they hit today. Drake's pushing for increased defense funding next week. If these files went public, his entire empire would collapse, a new voice interrupted. Standing in the vault doorway was a tall man in an expensive suit, flanked by 2 more operators. His silver hair and sharp features were instantly recognizable from countless news broadcasts. William Stone, CEO of Stone Global Securities, one of the largest private military contractors in the world. Commander Walsh, Stone said, his voice cultured and calm. Still fighting old wars, I see. And you must be Staff Sergeant Harrison. Impressive work upstairs. Marcus was supposed to be one of our best. Walsh's grip tightened on his cane. William, should have known you'd be here personally. Too much at stake to trust subordinates? Stone stepped into the vault, seemingly unconcerned by the unconscious bodies of his men. You know how it is, James. When you want something done right, He gestured to the scattered files. Those documents represent more than just scandal. They're proof of a necessary evil. Necessary? Mike's voice was hard. Selling military secrets. Getting our own people killed? Politics requires compromise, Sergeant Harrison, Stone replied. What you see as treason, we saw as pragmatism. Operation Ghostwalker uncovered certain arrangements that kept the balance of power exactly where it needed to be. Through his earpiece, Mike could hear confusion above. Marcus and his team were in custody, the plaza secured. But now he understood. That had just been the visible part of the operation. Stone was the real threat. Drake's defense contracts, Walsh said, realization dawning. Your company gets billions in funding through his committee. Stone smiled. Among other things, did you really think private military companies like mine operated without government support? Drake ensures our funding. We ensure his secrets. Stay buried. It's a system that's worked for decades. Until now, Mike said, the photograph heavy in his hand. Until now, Stone agreed. His pleasant expression didn't change as he reached into his jacket and produced a small remote. Unfortunately, while Marcus's detonator was disabled, mine still works perfectly. The charges are still in place. So, let's discuss terms. Walsh's voice was ice. There are still people in the archives. Regrettable casualties in an unfortunate terrorist attack, Stone said smoothly. That's how it will be reported. Islamic extremists targeting a symbol of American military might. Very tragic. Senator Drake will call for increased security funding. My company will win the contracts, and everything continues as it should. Mike's combat instinct screamed as Stone's operators subtly shifted positions. These weren't hired guns like the others. They moved with the precision of elite killers. The Kuwait files aren't the only copies, Walsh said suddenly. Stone's smile faltered slightly. What? You really think I came here today by accident? Walsh's grip adjusted on his cane. The moment your team breached the vault, everything was uploaded to secure servers. Dead man's switch. If anything happens to us, it all goes public. Stone's pleasant mask cracked. You're bluffing. Am I? Walsh smiled grimly. Why do you think I chose today? Veterans Council meeting upstairs, providing perfect cover for my own team to access the archive's secure terminals. By now, every major news outlet has the files in their inbox, set to release if a verification code isn't entered hourly. Mike watched the interplay, his own mind working. Walsh hadn't mentioned any of this earlier. Was he bluffing? Or had this been his plan all along? Stone's operators looked to him for orders, their weapons still trained on Mike and Walsh. The vault's emergency lights cast harsh shadows across Stone's face as he considered his options. Even if that's true, Stone said finally, accidents happen. 2 decorated veterans, tragically caught in a terrorist attack. Their deaths would only reinforce the need for increased security funding. Check your phone, Walsh replied calmly. Stone's expression didn't change, but he pulled out his phone. As he read whatever was on the screen, his face paled slightly. Impossible, he whispered. $347 million, Walsh said. Transferred from Stone Global's accounts to various offshore holdings in the past hour. Quite a paper trail. Almost like someone wanted to create evidence of payoffs to certain congressional staff members. Now Stone's calm facade cracked completely. You can't… Oh, but I did, Walsh interrupted. Or rather, my team did. Amazing what you can do with modern technology. Of course, all the transfers can be reversed, if you make the right choice here. Mike watched Stone's internal struggle play across his face. The man was a professional, used to controlling every situation. But now… Stand down, Stone finally ordered his operators. Full withdrawal, now. The operators hesitated for a moment, then lowered their weapons. Stone's hand, still holding the detonator, trembled slightly. The photos, he said. The files. Evidence of insurance, Walsh replied. Walk away now. They stay buried. For the moment. Stone's jaw tightened, but he knew he was beaten. This isn't over. No, Mike said, stepping forward. This is just the beginning. Because now we know who you are, and we'll be watching. As Stone and his operators withdrew, Mike turned to Walsh. Was any of that true? The dead man's switch? The transfers? Walsh's grim smile returned. Let's just say I learned a long time ago to always have a backup plan. He nodded toward the photo in Mike's hand. And now we have proof. Real proof. But Mike was already thinking ahead. Stone wouldn't give up easily. Men like him never did. Which meant this wasn't just about protecting old files anymore. It was about exposing a conspiracy that reached into the highest levels of government. And somehow, Mike knew, this was exactly what Walsh had planned all along. The victory in the vault was short-lived. Mike's radio crackled with urgent transmissions from above. The plaza was in chaos. Stone's withdrawal had triggered something none of them had expected. Multiple explosions reported at city emergency response centers, a police dispatcher announced. All units diverted. Repeat, all emergency services are being redirected. Walsh's face darkened. This was his backup plan. Create a citywide crisis to draw attention away from the memorial. Mike was already moving. The files, he's not trying to destroy them anymore. He's going to steal them in the confusion. Through their earpieces, they could hear the panic spreading above ground. Police, fire, and emergency services were all responding to a coordinated series of incidents across the city. Classic misdirection, Walsh said, following Mike through the tunnels. The vault fight was just to keep us occupied while they set up their real operation. They emerged from the service entrance to find the plaza in darkness. The memorial's power had been cut. Emergency generators somehow disabled. In the distance, sirens wailed as first responders raced to multiple crisis points throughout the city. Sir! One of Walsh's undercover team members rushed up, his tourist disguise discarded. Stone's men! They're not retreating. They're repositioning. Military-grade vehicles just pulled up on all sides of the memorial. Mike's combat instincts screamed. They're isolating the building. No witnesses, no interference. Walsh checked his tactical watch. Police response time to this sector is now 15 minutes minimum. Stone made sure every available unit is tied up elsewhere. Through the darkness, they could see figures moving with military precision, setting up positions around the memorial's perimeter. These weren't the same operators from below. These were elite tactical teams, dressed in black and moving like shadows. He's going to take the whole building, Mike realized. Not just the files, everything. Makes sense, Walsh nodded grimly. Why steal one secret when you can take them all? The memorial's archives contain decades of classified intelligence. In the wrong hands. Mike's radio came to life. Stone's voice, smooth and controlled once more. I must admit, Commander Walsh, you played that situation brilliantly. But did you really think I wouldn't have contingencies? Around the plaza, more figures appeared. Professional operators, taking up strategic positions, cutting off every escape route. Mike counted at least 20, maybe more in the shadows. You see, Stone continued, while you were focused on protecting the Kuwait files, my teams were placing charges at every major emergency response center in the city. One press of a button and the entire city's emergency services are overwhelmed. No one's coming to help. Walsh's expression remained steady, but Mike saw his grip tighten on his cane. How many people have to die for your secrets, William? As many as necessary, Stone replied coldly. Now here's what's going to happen. My teams are going to secure the memorial. All files, all archives, everything. You're going to let them. In exchange, I don't detonate the remaining charges across the city. Mike's mind raced. The memorial's archives contained more than just the Kuwait files. Years of military intelligence, operation records, personnel files, a treasure trove of classified information that could compromise thousands of operations and operatives worldwide. 10 minutes, Stone announced. "That's how long you have to clear your people out. Anyone remaining after that will be considered hostile." Walsh turned to Mike, his voice low. "I've got 4 teams in position, but we're outgunned." "These aren't hired thugs like before. These are Stone's personal wetwork teams, best in the business." "We have to assume he's not bluffing about the charges," Mike added, watching the tactical teams move closer. "If emergency services are tied up." "Civilians die," Walsh finished. "He's forcing us to choose between protecting the archives and saving lives." Another explosion rocked the city, this one closer. Through their earpieces, they could hear the chaos spreading. Emergency services were stretched to breaking point, exactly as Stone had planned. 8 minutes, Stone's voice reminded them. Mike studied the approaching tactical teams. Their movement patterns were familiar. Ex-military, probably special, forces from various nations. Stone had assembled an elite strike force for this operation. "Sir," Mike said quietly to Walsh, "those files, how bad would it be if he got them?" Walsh's face was grim. "Bad. Names of deep cover operatives. Details of black operations going back decades. In Stone's hands, it would compromise national security at every level. He could blackmail half of Washington. But if we try to stop him, innocent people die in the chaos he's created." Walsh looked older suddenly, the weight of command heavy on his shoulders. "He's forcing us to choose between 2 impossible options. 7 minutes. Mike watched Stone's team setting up breaching charges at the Memorial's entrances. They were professionals, moving with practiced efficiency. But something about their positioning nagged at his combat-trained mind. "Sir," he said suddenly, "I noticed something. Their setup, they're not just isolating the building, they're creating a kill box." Walsh's eyes narrowed. "Explain." "Look at their positions, the way they're arranged. This isn't just about securing the archives." Mike's voice was urgent. "Once they have what they want, they're going to eliminate everyone inside. No witnesses, no loose ends." 6 minutes, Stone announced, his voice almost cheerful now. "Tick-tock, gentlemen." Walsh and Mike exchanged looks. They both knew Stone would never leave witnesses to his operation, regardless of any deal. Which meant they had 6 minutes to figure out how to stop an elite tactical force, prevent multiple bombings across the city, and protect some of the nation's most sensitive secrets. And they had to do it all without getting everyone in the Memorial killed in the process. The next few minutes would determine not just their fate, but the safety of thousands of innocent civilians caught in Stone's web of chaos. Mike's mind raced as he surveyed the plaza, years of special operations experience clicking into place. "The Memorial's security systems," he said suddenly. "When Stone cut the main power, the backup generators didn't kick in." Walsh caught on immediately, because they wanted us to think they'd disabled them. But what if they didn't? Mike was already moving toward the security office. What if they just redirected the power? 5 minutes, Stone's voice reminded them coolly. Inside the security office, Mike went straight to the backup power controls. His hands moved across the panels with practiced efficiency, confirming his suspicion. "Look," he pointed to a subtle modification in the wiring. "They didn't disable the generators. They rerouted them." Walsh studied the alterations. "To power something else. But what?" "Their communications hub," Mike said. "A tactical operation this size needs coordinated communications. They're using our own backup power to run their command center." He traced the power lines on the security diagram. "And it's got to be close." Walsh's expression hardened with understanding. "The observation deck, perfect vantage point, covers all approaches." Through their earpieces, they could hear Stone's teams coordinating their positions. Professional, efficient. But now, they could detect the pattern in their radio traffic. Everything was being coordinated from a central position. 4 minutes, gentlemen. I do hope you're making the wise choice." Mike outlined his plan quickly. "If we can disrupt their command center, we create chaos in their ranks. No coordination, no synchronized assault. He pointed to the maintenance shaft they'd used earlier. It connects to the observation deck through the old ventilation system. They'll have guards, Walsh warned. Yes, Mike agreed. But they'll be watching the stairs and elevator. Nobody thinks about the maintenance access, not unless they've spent 2 years learning every inch of this place. Walsh's grim smile returned, like a veteran security guard would. He keyed his radio, using a secure channel to contact his hidden teams. All units, hold positions. Wait for my signal. 3 minutes. Mike and Walsh moved quickly through the maintenance tunnels, their footsteps silent from years of training. The observation deck was 3 stories up, accessed through a narrow shaft that hadn't been used in years. As they climbed, Mike could hear Stone's operators discussing their breach plans. Primary charges set. Secondary teams in position. Command confirms final countdown. Walsh signaled Mike to stop. They were just below the deck now, and voices were audible through the thin walls. Stone was there, coordinating his teams. 2 minutes left for them to make the right choice, Stone was saying. Though I doubt they will. Commander Walsh was always too idealistic for his own good. Mike pulled out his phone, showing Walsh a diagram of the deck's layout. They had one chance to get this right. If they failed, Stone's teams would breach the memorial, and people would die, both here and across the city. Remember, Stone continued, once we have the files, sanitize the entire site. No witnesses, no loose ends. Make it look like a terrorist attack gone wrong. Walsh's face hardened at the casual way Stone discussed murder. He reached into his jacket and pulled out what looked like a small remote. EMP device, he whispered. Military grade. We'll fry their communications, but we'll only get one shot, Mike finished. And we have to be close enough for it to work. 1 minute. They found the access panel, years of dust suggesting no one had opened it in decades. Mike's security credentials granted them access to the manual override. The hinges had been oiled recently. Walsh's preparation, Mike realized. The old commander had planned for something like this. Through the small opening, they could see Stone's command center. 3 operators manning communications equipment, 2 guards watching the main entrance, and Stone himself standing by the window, surveying his team's positions below. 30 seconds, Stone announced. Breach teams, final check. Mike caught Walsh's eye, confirming their timing. The EMP would disrupt all electronic devices in range, including their own radios. They'd be cutting themselves off from their backup, but it was their only chance to prevent a massacre. 15 seconds. Walsh's thumb hovered over the EMP trigger. Mike tensed, ready to move. Years of combat experience had taught them both that timing was everything in an operation like this. 10 seconds. 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3. Walsh pressed the button. The effect was instant. Every electronic device in range died simultaneously. The operator's communications equipment sparked and went dark. Stone's radio cut off mid-word. Even the lights flickered and died. Mike and Walsh burst through the access panel before anyone could react. Mike went low, taking out the nearest guard with a sweeping leg kick, while Walsh's cane found vulnerable points on the second guard with surgical precision. The operators at the communications desk reached for weapons, but the confined space worked against them. Mike's hand-to-hand combat training proved lethal in close quarters, while Walsh moved with the fluid grace of someone who had spent decades perfecting his technique. Stone himself managed to draw a pistol, but Walsh's cane knocked it aside before he could aim. Mike secured the remaining operators while Walsh cornered Stone against the windows overlooking the plaza below. "It's over, William," Walsh said quietly, but Stone's smile suggested otherwise. "Is it?" He nodded toward the plaza, where his teams were already moving to breach the memorial. "My men know the contingency plan. If they lose contact with command, they execute everyone inside, and those charges across the city, they're on independent triggers. Kill me, they still detonate." Mike moved to the window, studying the tactical teams below. Without central coordination, their movements were less synchronized, but no less deadly. They were veterans of too many operations to let communications failure stop them. "So," Stone said calmly, despite Walsh's cane pressed against his throat. "What's it going to be? Try to stop my teams and let civilians die across the city? Or let us take what we came for?" But Mike had noticed something Stone hadn't, a pattern in the tactical team's movements. Without their communications, they'd fallen back on standard operating procedures. Procedures Mike recognized from his own military training. "Sir," he said to Walsh, "I know those protocols. If we can't stop all the teams..." Walsh caught his meaning immediately. "We can make them stop themselves." Stone's confident smile faltered slightly. "What are you talking about?" Mike was already moving, because he'd just figured out how to turn Stone's own tactical precision against him. They had no radios, no communications, and only minutes before the memorial turned into a kill zone. But sometimes, the best way to stop an unstoppable force was to give it exactly what it expected, and then change the rules of engagement entirely. Mike moved with purpose, every step drawing on years of special operations experience. "Those teams down there," he said, keeping his eyes on Stone, "they're running Directive 7 protocols. Standard operating procedure when communications go dark." Walsh's expression shifted with recognition. "The kill zone formation." "Exactly," Mike nodded. "Without central command, they default to establishing a converging kill zone. But that also means they're locked into predictable positions," Walsh finished, his cane still pressed against Stone's throat. "Positions you recognize." Stone's confident facade cracked slightly. "You can't possibly..." But Mike was already pulling the curtains open wide, making the observation deck visible from the plaza below. "Sir," he said to Walsh, "your team still have the plaza covered?" 4 units, Walsh confirmed. "Still dark, but they know the contingency plans." Mike turned to Stone, his voice hard. "Here's what's going to happen. You're going to stand up, nice and visible, and give your abort signal to the teams below." Stone's laugh was cold. "Or what? You'll kill me? The moment I die, those charges across the city detonate automatically. Dead man's switch, remember?" "Who said anything about killing you?" Mike moved closer, his voice dropping. "I spent 2 years guarding this memorial, learning its history. Did you know there's a special section dedicated to Operation Ghostwalker? Not the official version, the real one." For the first time, genuine fear flickered across Stone's face. "Those files you wanted so badly," Mike continued. "They're not just about Kuwait. They're about everything that came after, every contract, every payoff, every secret deal, including the ones you made with certain hostile governments." Walsh caught on immediately. "Imagine those files reaching your current clients, William. How many billions in contracts would vanish overnight? How many of your business partners would want to have a very serious conversation about loyalty?" Stone's composure cracked further. "You're bluffing." "Am I?" Mike nodded toward the plaza below, where Stone's teams were moving into their final assault positions. "Right now, your reputation is all that's keeping those men loyal. But if those files go public, if they learn who you really work for..." "Oh, you built your empire on being the perfect mercenary," Walsh added. "The man who could be trusted to keep secrets. What happens when they learn you've been selling those secrets to the highest bidder?" Stone's eyes darted between them, calculating odds, weighing options. Below, his teams were moments away from breaching the memorial. "Last chance," Mike said quietly. "Give the abort signal, or we start broadcasting everything. Not just the Kuwait files, everything. Every deal, every betrayal, every name in your real client list." For a long moment, Stone said nothing. Then, slowly, he moved to the window. His hand raised, forming a specific gesture, a tactical signal that every operator below would recognize. The effect was immediate. The assault teams froze, then began pulling back from their breach positions. Years of conditioning made them respond instantly to the recognized command signal. "Stand down," Stone spoke into his backup radio, his voice tight with suppressed rage. "Full withdrawal. Authentication code Sierra 9 Delta." Walsh kept his cane ready as Mike confirmed the teams were actually retreating. Through their newly restored earpieces, they could hear the confusion and frustration in the operators' voices, but none dared question the direct order. "The charges in the city!" Walsh demanded. Stone's jaw clenched, but he pulled out another device and pressed a sequence of buttons. "Disarmed. You can verify with emergency services." Mike was already getting confirmation through his radio. The crisis points across the city were reporting all clear. Stone's operation was unraveling completely. "You think this changes anything?" Stone snarled, his cultured veneer finally cracking entirely. "You have no idea how deep this goes. The people I work for will be very interested to learn about your failure," Walsh interrupted, "and about the evidence we've gathered. How long do you think you'll last once they realize you've compromised their operations?" Stone's face went pale, because he knew Walsh was right. In his world, failure wasn't just punished. It was eliminated. Mike moved to secure Stone as police sirens finally approached the memorial. The city's emergency services, freed from Stone's diversions, were converging on their location. "Your choice now," Mike said quietly. "Face justice here, or face your employers later. But either way, your empire ends tonight." Stone's shoulders slumped in defeat, because he knew that even if he escaped, even if he avoided prosecution, his reputation was destroyed. In the world of private military contractors, reputation was everything. And he'd just failed spectacularly in front of his entire operational team. As Walsh's men secured the observation deck, Mike looked out over the Memorial Plaza. The tactical teams were withdrawing, the threats to the city were neutralized, and the archives were safe. But he knew this wasn't really the end. Because somewhere out there were the people Stone worked for, the ones who'd wanted those files destroyed. And now they knew someone had stopped them. Walsh seemed to read his thoughts. "They'll try again," the old commander said quietly. "Different tactics, different assets, but same objective." Mike nodded. "Then we'll be ready. Because that's what we do. We guard the truth, not just the memorial." Stone looked between them, final realization dawning. This was your plan all along, wasn't it? You wanted them to make a move. Walsh's grim smile returned. Sometimes the best way to expose a conspiracy is to let it show itself. You just happened to be the one they sent. As police tactical units swarmed the plaza, Mike understood that his role as a simple security guard was over. He'd become part of something much bigger. A guardian, not just of a memorial, but of the truths it contained. And somewhere in the city, others like Stone were already planning their next move. But now they knew someone was watching. Someone was ready to stop them. The war for truth was just beginning. The morning sun cast long shadows across Memorial Plaza as cleanup crews cleared the last signs of the previous night's confrontation. Mike Harrison stood at his usual post, his security uniform pristine. But something had changed. The way he carried himself, the way he watched the morning crowds, it was different now, more purposeful. Commander Walsh approached, his cane tapping softly against the stone path. To casual observers, he looked like any other veteran visiting the memorial. But Mike knew better now. "Stone's talking," Walsh said quietly, stopping beside Mike as if admiring the memorial wall. His empire's crumbling fast. Private military. Contracts cancelled, clients disappearing, bank accounts frozen. Amazing how quickly rats abandon a sinking ship. Mike nodded slightly, maintaining his professional stance. "And the emergency services personnel?" "All safe. Bomb disposal units found and disarmed every charge. Stone's contingency plans were thorough. He had devices planted at 15 different locations across the city. Could have been a massacre. The morning tour groups were starting to arrive, cameras clicking as they captured images of the memorial's solemn beauty. None of them knew how close they'd come to disaster, or that the quiet security guard they barely noticed had helped prevent it. Stone's employers are going to be looking for answers, Mike said, his voice low. They won't stop just because one operation failed. Walsh's grip tightened slightly on his cane. No, they won't. That's why I'm here. The Veterans Council has created a new security division. Off the books, of course. We need people who understand what's really at stake here. People who can guard more than just buildings. Mike caught the implied offer. Sir, if you're suggesting... I'm not suggesting anything, Staff Sergeant Harrison. I'm telling you that your role here is about to expand significantly. Walsh smiled slightly. Unless you prefer standing in one spot all day. A family approached the Wall of Heroes, a young boy pointing excitedly at the inscriptions. Mike watched them, remembering why he'd chosen this post after leaving the Marines. The memorial still needs protection, sir. It'll have it, but now. We know it needs more than just physical security. The secrets preserved here, the truths in those archives, they're part of a bigger picture. Stone was just one piece of a much larger puzzle. Through his earpiece, Mike heard regular security, updates, everything normal, everything routine. But now he understood that routine was just another kind of camouflage. The Kuwait files were digitized this morning, Walsh continued. Secured in multiple locations, but they've already caused quite a stir in certain circles. 3 senators have announced early retirement. 2 defense contractors have suspended operations pending internal reviews. They're running scared, Mike observed, for now. But scared people are dangerous people, especially when they have resources and secrets to protect. Walsh turned slightly, watching a group of tourists photo the eternal flame. We've exposed one conspiracy, but there are others. The memorial's archives contain decades of hidden truths, and plenty of powerful people who want them to stay hidden. Mike thought about the previous night, about how what seemed like simple bullying had exposed something far darker. How deep does it go, sir? Deep enough that we need people we can trust. People with the right skills and the right instincts. Walsh straightened, his posture showing his military bearing. Your actions last night proved you're one of those people. A school group passed by, their teacher explaining the memorial's significance. Mike watched them, understanding that he was guarding not just their safety, but their right to know the truth about their nation's history. The new security division, Mike said carefully. What exactly would it involve? Officially? You'll remain at your post guarding the memorial, unofficially. Walsh's voice hardened slightly. We've identified other sites, other archives. Places where secrets are stored, where truth needs protection. Stone's operation showed us how vulnerable these places can be. Mike understood. His role as a security guard had been cover for something bigger. And now that cover would serve an even more important purpose. There will be others, Walsh continued. More attempts to steal or destroy evidence, to bury the truth. We need people in place to stop them. People who can recognize the signs, who can act when needed. Through his earpiece, Mike heard a routine call. Post 4, status check. Post 4, all clear, he responded automatically, but his mind was already processing Walsh's offer. This wasn't just about standing guard anymore. It was about standing watch over something far more precious than bronze and stone. Sir, Mike said finally, about those other sites you mentioned. Walsh smiled slightly. Interested in a change of scenery, Staff Sergeant? No, sir. Just interested in protecting what matters. Mike's eyes scanned the plaza, taking in the tourists, the families, the veterans paying their respects. Someone has to guard the truth. Well then, Walsh said, straightening his jacket. I believe we have some planning to do. Your shift ends at 1800 hours. Meet me at the coffee shop across the street. We'll discuss your new duties." As Walsh walked away, his cane tapping softly against the stone, Mike returned to his watch. But now he saw the memorial differently. Every statue, every inscription, every carefully preserved document in the archives below, they weren't just artifacts. They were pieces of truth that someone had fought to preserve. And now it was his turn to join that fight. A young girl approached, pointing at his uniform, asking her mother if he was a real soldier. Mike didn't move, maintaining his professional stance, but he allowed himself a small smile. Because now he knew, sometimes the most important battles weren't fought with weapons, but with the courage to protect the truth, no matter the cost. The morning sun climbed higher, and tourists continued to flow through the plaza, snapping photos and reading inscriptions. To them, nothing had changed. The memorial still stood, peaceful and eternal, guarded by the silent sentinel in his crisp uniform. But Mike Harrison knew differently. Somewhere out there, powerful people were planning their next move, and he would be ready. Because that's what guards do. They protect what matters most, whether it's carved in stone or hidden in archives. And the truth, he had learned, needed guarding most of all. Up next, don't miss these compelling stories that will keep you on the edge of your seat. If you enjoyed this tale of courage and conspiracy, you won't want to miss what happens next. Click to discover more extraordinary adventures waiting for you.